Trends is a clever word. When we look at trends, it's are we being trendy, which is hype. And though it's amazing and important to look at things like the Gartner hype cycle, when we look at trendy things, I always think about it as reasoned possibilities. Things that we're seeing reverberate in culture in a new way that we can see the long-term effects.
You help brands to productize the multiverse. How do you see the multiverse being used to engage customers in the future?
The metaverse, when it comes to the metaverse, I think it's a wonderful place right now to be testing and learning. It is not, for me and the work that I do, the stop. So how I work with clients around that is to figure out how we can test and learn in the metaverse. There are amazing products there. There's amazing cultural movements such as DAOs occurring. And how can we bring those into the long-term strategies and ways we have to adapt to Web3? So when we look at the metaverse, it's test and learn and move forward into Web3.
How do you define an innovation roadmap?
So obviously an innovation roadmap would have some leanings towards a product roadmap, but it is much heavier on the insight, creativity, collaboration, and multiple new ways to get into things in the beginning. Then it's very similar to a product roadmap in the middle of the sandwich. And towards the end, it's a lot more about how things get acquired, potential ways for new revenue, and how that really builds into a potential venture. So it's much more on the monetary side instead of just a use case.
How can businesses encourage innovative thinking in the workplace?
Having innovative thinking in the workplace is fundamental. It helps us retain talent, keeps people excited about their work. So it's always a mixture of having education at its core, having transparency, because there's a lot of people that can think of solutions if they know there could be a problem, and then providing the opportunity to allow that collaboration to occur. So very simple, create that space and allow people to have it.
Often when challenging the status quo, it can come with inherent risks. How can businesses innovate while mitigating the risks of their strategy, not warranting results?
Well, it is a risky business, but we have to create space for risk when we're innovating. My credo for innovation is hope via disruption. This innovation should always have a positive spin. It should be a place in which hope is created, even when there's those small little disturbances around. So whatever we do, as long as everyone knows we're solution focused, we can hopefully mitigate people's fear around the risk. It's also something very important to look at the financial risk and reward and make sure you're playing on a level playing field.
What are your top tips for identifying future trends?
Trends is a clever word. When we look at trends, it's are we being trendy, which is hype. And though it's amazing and important to look at things like the Gartner hype cycle, when we look at trendy things, I always think about it as reasoned possibilities. Things that we're seeing reverberate in culture in a new way that we can see the long-term effects. So, as I like to keep things hopeful, I'm also looking at the reasoned possibilities that things will change in our future and how we need to start preparing for that in the long term. So how I look for trends is I listen and then I translate them towards the future.
Brilliant. And can we get a little bit of a sneak peek of the future trends coming up?
Absolutely. So some of the trends that I'm looking at right now is brand belonging, the shift as we move towards Web3, that we're no longer focused on brand ownership, but what is belonging in that space. I'm also looking at what I call social snorkeling. You see that when you see these deep dives by content creators, and it can be anything around a murder investigation to a pop culture conspiracy theory to just explaining how to cook something. They're episodic and they're not it's just a light snorkel around as they go through it. And a third trend to share is a move towards the relevance economy. So we've had the influencer economy, and as we start moving towards relevance targets in social media and also media at large, it's much more about relevance than limiting into a certain target or personality about that.
So how can businesses adjust their existing strategies to better target the next generation of consumers?
So when we look at our next generation of consumers, I will lean on the trend of the relevance economy, because I think it's very important that we start looking at things in that way. You definitely saw people start catering towards targeting of influencers and content creators in a certain way. And what we've learned through the disruption of TikTok is that content and the way in which stories are told is what makes a virality. So that relevance to who you are and what you're interested in is the world we'll be in. And as we take that into the Web3 world, where we will, for instance, have glasses on, that we're in that world and we want to live in a world that's relevant to what we're seeing, that's how we're going to continue to evolve that. And so it's taking our understanding of what's happening on TikTok, what's happening in the metaverse, and what's possible in the technology coming ahead.